Well, what might be on your mind this morning? Something that you might throw on the table. Not going to throw anything on the table, huh?
I think what touched me this morning was hearing about these people that you know that moved to I think it was a white couple that moved to a black neighborhood just to share Christ, and you mentioned somebody else that moved under the bridge, or near a bridge, to share Christ with. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, Dwayne Crabb has ministered down in inner city. In fact, they just had, I think, their 10th anniversary about a month ago. I went to that. They had a big dinner. It was down inner city church, and when you went there, you got really a big mixed bag. I mean, it isn't typically anywhere near what you would see here. And so he felt called to go down and be a part of their community. And as a result of that, he moved in, and he's got a great ministry with them in that area. The girl that I mentioned, I can't remember her name. Her name is Jody. About at least 5 years ago, she moved under the Y Bridge, right in the midst of that. Drug dealers all around and so on. And they gutted an old house down there. We put the heating in it. And she moved in there, and the house was rehabilitated, and she did that to have this ministry with these kids. I don't know what they call it, Perkins or what it is, but if you look down in there, there's the river, and then they got looks like a community center, and so she has an outreach there, and I thought she's the bravest kid I ever met in my life. And she's a pretty little girl, and right out of today, and moves right down there in the heart of that, has a child. She gets married, had a child, and man, I want to tell you, when we did that job, we had to send 2 guys down there because they were afraid to work. That's what. But she moved in there in the midst of them, and as a result of that, she has great ministry with them. Urban Vision is the name of the ministry, and Dwayne Crabb has a South Street mission. This brings up one of the things that in going through this, the needs are so great. For example, Mike Christian, he had a hip replacement. And Thursday night I went to his house for dinner. And I met his mom and dad for the first time. Very nice people, and his 2 daughters and so on. One just had a baby. We had a wonderful dinner. Mike called me yesterday and said that Saturday night he took his dad to the church that he's going to that has an inner city ministry, and they get all the drug addicts, and they give big testimonies how they just got saved and delivered. And we've been praying for his dad, and I wouldn't call him a shy man, but this is not an arena that he functions in. Religion hasn't been much of a program for him. Then his wife is a deep-seated Catholic. It's not that. Anyway, they were very responsive and to me because we've been through some tough things with Mike. But his dad went to this meeting Saturday night, and his dad heard these stories and cried. His dad's probably my age. And then this morning, his dad asked him to go to church with him. And I guess his mother is going reluctantly because if it isn't in her scope of religion, she doesn't want it. Now, what you'd be experiencing down there this morning is entirely different from what you'd be experiencing here. They're seeing the drug addicts delivered, the drunks delivered. They're getting up and giving one testimony after the other so that when the preacher starts to preach, everybody's weeping and crying and praising the Lord. You don't have to cultivate any of this. Those people, you know what Mike told? He said, I can't wait to get there. He said, I bask in it and I just sit there and I just absorb it all. Oh. Interesting, very interesting, very interesting. So anyway, when you begin to respond on to reflect on all of that, there's an area that touches the nervous system of the community. Not many do. And not many will be experiencing what that church is experiencing this morning. And anyway, I don't want to pursue that too much, but when you see a Mike, when the first time I saw Mike, I knew that he lived over there where I live, but I didn't know that that was him. But I would walk by, I take a walk, and I'd come by to see the police cars, I'd see the fire department and the 9/11 bunch. I wonder what that's. So I had somebody call me and say, there's a guy over here, they think maybe you can help him. I said, well, I don't know if I can help him or not. Anyway, it was Mike. About as bad a drug addict as you could find. And anyway, I got a call. Some people came to see me and told me what he was doing. And I called him on a Saturday night, and we have a party center over there, and I said, I'll meet you over there at 10 o'clock. Well, anyway, at 10 o'clock, I went over, and I sat there. There's like one light is on, the light in the hall, and I begin to hear this movement coming around. Anyway, I opened the hallway door, and here's Mike, and he looks like he's just out of Auschwitz. He lays in bed. First of all, he has to drink vodka out of a bowl like a dog. Then he gets sick, and then he's got to get on the drug. And all he does every day is lay there in bed and do all of this. That's his life. So when he comes down this hallway, I open the door, and I want to tell you, he'd make the hair on your head and back of your neck stand up. He looked like a ghost. And he was in such a stupor, we couldn't do much with him. And I brought him here the next morning to church, but he was too far gone then. Anyway, they finally put him in a slammer for about 4 months, which is the best thing that ever happened to them, because now they're quiet, they shut up, the drugs are gone, and they have a little time to reflect with some degree of sanity because there's nothing to do. And then when he got it, he called me, and then, of course, he came here for several Sundays. This is not his bag. Jack Dalrymple is now out. Jack has been here. This is not Jack's bag. We don't really know how to deal with those people. There's no need to put the ball, right, Janet? We don't know how to deal with it. So Jack is called me. Now, frankly, most all of them will go down to this church that I'm telling you about because they congregate there, and the pastor is out of the criminal system. He's been 25 years ago. He went through the process, so he knows all the language and everything that they talk about. You can't reach those people if you haven't been with them. Them coming up here is just a waste of time. They've got to go someplace where they know when you touch certain nerves that you're touching them. So these people, in fact, you'd be interested in this, Janet. I won't go into all of it, but I don't know whether it was someday this past week, I was at where I get coffee, and the guy next to me turned around, and it was Pluto, Terry. So Terry is a sports writer for the Beacon Journal. So he and I had a long conversation, and I got a nice letter from him, and I got some new books that he just wrote. And which, in light of what I was working with here that was on my mind, had me come in with a mixed bag because I wanted to. This is one book he wrote on the life of Bill Glass, Champions for Life. When you get into this, it's called, actually Bill Glass was an all-pro with the Cleveland Browns. He played in the 1964 championship team. He's got a tremendous prison ministry now. And what he talks about here is the Father's blessing. And it causes me to reflect because this is something that's absolutely lost today. But what he finds, and what I've found going in the prison system, you talk, for example, out of 300 of young people or fathers and so on that were in jail, Glass pursued, how many of them had visitations? In the whole time they were there, only one had a visitation from the family because nobody wants them. And actually, as we discussed the prison ministry, nobody wants those people. Even the church doesn't want them. The reason they don't want them is because they don't know how to deal with them, basically. Not all churches, but I'm talking of the two churches that do want them. That's not true either. So anyway, that was there is so much that involved in this, that if you read this, it'll change your complexion because very few young men today have father mentors, father figures. So Anyway, so much of this work is done in the inner city that by not too many. So I talked to Terry, and I said we had some discussions from the past. I told him, I says, you know what, we got a handful of people with the whole prison system wanting to give us all we can take. And we got a few people that are working in it, and we got a small little budget that's being supported, and people criticize us that we're not doing enough. And Janet's involved in that in a wonderful way, and there's just so many of them. This whole city, they'll give us all of these people that we can handle, because they don't know how to deal with them. They don't know what the answer is, so what they do is they build more prisons. And that isn't the solution, because as stated in his book, you got to break the way people think. The criminal has a mindset. He doesn't address it, but it's a demonically inspired thought pattern. Once that gets in there, if we don't, unfortunately, we don't address the demonic influences that are behind all of this, or the way the enemy weaves his way into the mind and keeps it activated along those lines to keep these people captives. And so it's a long process. Now, for example, we go in for the resurrection breakfast on around Easter time. Now you can bring all the inmates out. Usually at Summit County Jail, you bring out two groups. Janet's in the women's section. I'm just referring to the men's section. So if you speak, well, I was at Stark County. I spoke 4 times down there because they only bring so many in. So you have them for about an hour. At Summit County, they bring the first group in. You get about 80 or 90, and then the second group follows the first group. You get about another 80 or 90, and so you can speak to them. Now, it used to be that the toughest set were the oldest convicts, but there was one group that we couldn't bring in because if we were to address them, we had to go to them. They wouldn't let them out of their cells. They're so vicious, so unpredictable. So they opened up a little slot. They could open their slot. You could speak through the slot. The people, those people that were incarcerated there would lift up their slots. You know what each group was? Teenagers. The most vicious of the lot. Because they're absolutely unpredictable. And Jeremiah says, you think your fathers were bad, wait till you get their kids. Kids are always worse than the fathers. Because whatever was handed down isn't handed down anymore. So the few little pieces that might make a contribution to the lives of people, they're gone. So as a result, what we don't do, we don't have the capacity now to hand down the next generation the value systems. When I was in Russia, for example, what had happened there was, during the communists, they took out one generation. You have the generation here that was in charge. You have the generation that was taken out by the communists, and you have the generation of the old people. For 70 years, they took out a whole generation of people. So if you sent things into the Russians, they couldn't get them from the railroad yard. They couldn't even organize to get the stuff out of the boxcars to the distribution centers, so it rotted on the boxcars. There was nothing handed down. They didn't know how to do anything. It was so graphic that when you talked to them, they were no longer Russia. They were the Confederation of Russian States. The underground church had come up. They didn't know who they were, Baptists, Presbyterians, or who they were. Politicians didn't know. Nobody knew who they were. So, because nothing, they sliced out a generation, didn't pass anything down. And so by the time you get the surviving generation, they can't function, see. So it's book is what it says it is. It just, anyway. So big work. You want to move down there? I'm sure they got some cheap property you can buy. You're looking for property or houses? Got them down there cheap, and you can rehabilitate them for nothing. Go ahead, Jan.
I don't know if you knew this, but yesterday we took the youth group down to South Street Ministries.
Yeah.
Did you know that? I don't know if you talked about that ahead of time, but it was really wonderful. And the kids, they were hard workers, and Lisa Krabs commented on how so many people drag their youth groups there, and the kids are like, we don't want to be here. They ask, she gives them an assignment, they don't want to do it. They're just there because their parents forced them to be there. And she said, your youth group was really a good group of kids. She said their hearts were willing, to do the work, and they were willing to be instructed. So when she asked them to do something, they did it with a willing heart. And there were, I think there were 4 or 5 of us adults there. We were kind of working with the rakers, the ones who were doing the leaf raking, and the ones who were cleaning out the bike shed, and the ones that were cleaning out their little weight room. And so it was a good experience, and some of the kids walked away from there with their heart really like, I want to come back. Like Rachel Feather, she wants to do downtown ministry. She wants to do that kind of work, and she was like, I want to come back. I want to work with these kids. So I thought it was a good experience for them, and Lisa and Wayne were so happy just to have people come and help them. It was wonderful.
When I was in Florida years ago, I asked prison officials, how many prisoners in Florida are Jewish? The answer was 13. More than 60,000 inmates in prison in Florida at that time, only 13 were Jewish. As of 2004, there were 585 Jewish inmates incarcerated in Florida, with a total population in Florida of 72,000. The Jewish inmates were still less than 1%, and Florida does not have, and does have a significant Jewish population. Why do so few Jews end up in jail? It's because many of the old Jewish fathers from the beginning of time followed the tradition of blessing their sons and daughters. Isaac wasn't the only one. It went down through the generations. Till this day, the Jewish father at the bar mitzvah blesses his son or daughter. That's why you don't see many Jews in prisons anywhere in the world. That's why you don't see many Jews in prison, a lot of Gentiles, but very few Jews. The old Jewish fathers knew how to gather their sons and daughters close to them, hug them, kiss them, and bless them. Many of us need to learn to practice. There are a lot of Baptists, Methodists, Pentecostal, Catholics, and all denominations in prison, but very few Jews. We conducted a weekend of champion in Chicago at the Cook County Jail. 13,000 inmates are housed, and 18 of them were still children, not yet teenagers. We asked those boys ages 9 to 12, how many of you carried a gun? All 18. How many have used drugs? All 18. How many of you are in a gang? All 18. How many of you have been sexually active? All 18. How many of you have a father that lives at home with you? 0. And so in Sabah, Texas, at a prison for boys ranging from 10 to 15 years old, I asked the warden, I said, how many of these boys had a visit from their father in the past year? You know what he told me? One boy. One boy got a 15-minute visit from his father. Only one boy out of 300 got a visit from it. What a tragedy. What happened to the other 299 fathers? I'll tell you what they are. They're a bunch of wimps. They're not fathers. They don't deserve the title. They are sperm donors. So when you get into something like this, this brings up one of my favorite stories. A guy who was getting a divorce. During the divorce proceedings, the judge asked, how often do you tell your wife you love her? He said, I told her the day I married her, and that applies until I tell her differently. You wonder why he's getting a divorce. How could he be so irresponsible? A bell isn't a bell until you ring it. A blessing isn't a blessing until you say it. I know my daddy loved me. He just couldn't say it. But if your daddy didn't say it, he really didn't bless you. By definition, a blessing has to be spoken. It has to communicate 3 things: love, value, and belonging. How do you start? You start by saying, I love you. And so when I get into this type of thing, every child deserves a blessing. One of the things that in your words, what you call young people, they never forget those words. And so as I begin, he has his first child is handicapped, and we've had one of those. And he talks about the blessing, the disappointment he gets when he gets the handicapped child, but the blessing the child becomes. So anyway, when I began to, when you take the athletes and so on, most athletes respond to the father figure they have as the coach. He's the one. So when we get so many demented, especially young men, guys that are off the wall, they've never had any of this. So we wonder why they react the way they do and why all of the marriage problems and so on. It's because of, frankly, a poor job in parenting, which, as I've listened to all this, there was another book he written. I didn't bring it with me, but it's about crime, how we're losing the war on crime. Because the criminal has a criminal mind. Your mind isn't like that. But most all of them have been abused. They've experienced something. They've been cursed when they were young. They were violated when they were young, and it carries over. They don't trust anybody. Even some of those that they trusted ended up abusing them. So
that is very true, the pattern that you see inside the jail systems. I mean, once you get past the facade, you know, you think they're there because they're such mean, rotten people. Well, a lot of them have done mean, rotten things, but when you get down to the core of it, most of them are abused, neglected. They've been raised up in a pattern of lifestyle. Not all, but the majority have been raised up in all that, and you know they've been destroyed since their souls are destroyed when they're kids, and they never come out of it until they come to Christ.
he says, then I got in a gang. In less than a year, my life fell apart. I was in prison. He was searching for his father's blessing from that gang. He just didn't know it. I met a lot of inmates whose fathers committed suicide. They feel rejected, abandoned, and worthless. The father didn't even think enough of them to stay alive and watch them grow. At least that's how they see it. That made sense to me. Research tells us that suicide is one of the worst curses a parent can inflict on a family. It's very common for a suicide to appear in several different generations. That's true. It was true, listen to this, in the family of Ernest Hemingway. The father of the great writer killed himself. Do you know what Ernest Hemingway did? He killed himself. If only Hemingway could have understood the impact of Psalm 141 verse 3, God heals the brokenhearted, binds up their wounds. As a result of that, we're talking about prayer. I'm speaking prayer breakfast on Thursday. What would I go down to try to do? Teach prayer? Not a chance. Not a chance. I wouldn't go down to try to. Why would you? How? With people in the church that are coming to pray, my conviction is the only sin that we have to confess is the fact we don't pray. There will be people who will come down there to pray. They'll sit around the table. You've got to give people the evidences of prayer. I'm taking since 1973, I've kept a record of everybody I've led to Christ. There are hundreds on these pages. This is the result of prayer. Before I get up in the morning, I pray for at least 400 people every morning by me. I will not permit my feet to touch the floor without praying for these people.
Fred, back to your suicide note, when I was a kid growing up, at my church, there was a kid there throughout junior high and high school, sit in a room like this in Sunday school every day and every Sunday, and seemed like he seemed like a pretty normal kid, although he was a little bit of girls didn't like him because he was a little geekish and things like that. But it was really sad. On his 21st birthday, he committed suicide on the same day his father had committed suicide in the exact same place by jumping off the high-level bridge. And here's you didn't see it coming.
I'm just going to show you this, and I won't even let you catch the cover, but this is something that I wrote when I was working for a young pastor that was all messed up. And the other night, I heard the same thing about some people lifting a son, I think, to prayer. And I listened to that. As I listened to that, they were talking about him being bipolar. I want you to know there's no scriptural content for bipolarism. When you become bipolar, what begins to happen is that you have been subject to a demonically inspired thought system. Now, there are two things that we deal with in this. To the believer, When your mind gets messed up, here is the number one thing that affects your mind. All of us in the church should be able to know how to deal with this. As I listened to this person pray for this young person about getting an answer to prayer, I went up to him afterward. I said, I'm going to give you the answer to your prayer. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a PhD and a doctor of all of this banana stuff, and so I can give them, and they say, well, you're qualified, at least talk to me. They're very bright people. I said, there's no such thing as bipolar. We live in a demonic arena that's gaining more and more sophistication by being able to whisper into your mind. Now, I talk to people about that and go, yes, sure, we understand. But when you violate what it says, you experience guilt. Once you experience guilt, you're preoccupied with it. I said, does the person appear to be preoccupied? Yes, very preoccupied. Dull expression, listening to voices. Anytime you violate the Word of God and violate your own standards, you're going to experience guilt, and the enemy is going to start whispering to you and accusing you. Those will be accusations you'll hear in your mind. Fortunately, the one that comprehends this as much as I do is him. We have been through, he recognizes anytime you hear you in your voice, your mind, it is always a satanic operation of the enemy who follows you. Now, once he gets this on this boy who knows Christ, God removes his peace. Anytime that you violate what this says, Satan has a legal access to you to start his work. It's God's whip. Until you come back with the boy and the story I was telling you about. I mentioned some things in his behavior. She said, yes, I think they were there. They were pornographic in nature. Anytime that you do something with your body that displeases God as a Christian, God begins to chastise you. So, right here, I get chastisement with God. With the enemy, I get guilt. God will chastise me. The enemy starts reeling on me with guilt. That happens every day. Now, every one of you has a demonic spirit that follows you, knows exactly how to make his entrance into your mind, observes what you're doing as he observes it. Too bad we can't paint the unseen world that's afflicting you so that when you do something, you can see him run right up to you and begin whispering in your ear, and you listen to this and people say, I heard voices. You do hear voices. This is like talking to the wall when you talk to people about this. But at this level, so many of these are guilty, they don't know how to get out of their guilt. Once they start acting in this type of behavior, they lose restraint. Once they lose restraint, now they can do anything to you. They can kill you. As these prisoners now who are older observe the younger ones, they know, the older ones know that the young ones have lost restraint because there's a code of ethics among prisoners. They have their own code. Now what they're all fearful of, they're fearful of the young ones who come in and have no restraints at all, and because they don't have any restraints, they're absolutely predictable, and you can tell them something, they'll sit right there and agree with you and all the rest of it, and 5 minutes later they could kill you. See? So as we see, in fact, the scriptures, and I can't remember, it says when people get like we get, even the enemy, they walk through the neighborhoods and the areas and the streets. And if we ignore what this says, we just get things that become worse and worse. So you say, well, none of this is what I was going to talk about.
Fred, I have a question. When you said the demonic force or whatever, and you said guilt's one of them, is another way of approaching it, does he send people? Could he send someone in actual human form to torment you, to give you a hard time, to do whatever?
He sent him at Virginia Tech. All of that was somebody now who was given over to a demonic activity. If you go back in that boy's life that committed that crime, listen to the type of things that go on. You know what? They're ignoring you. Same old thing. Look at all that. They're hitting us. Look at all that. They ignore you. Yeah. Oh, man. And finally, that ferments over. You know what you could do? What could I do? You could kill him. You could kill him. I want to tell you, I don't want you to answer. Have you ever had a thought of suicide? I asked somebody of your point level, I was interested in this story, if he's at the point of suicide, because if you go down through the spirits that you work with you to get you in this condition, the bottom line spirit on that, I call him number 8, his name is dread. Anytime you're talking to somebody that's thinking about suicide, you're talking to somebody who has a sense of dread. When he begins to work on you, he moves you to commit suicide. You're actually being moved by a spirit to act on that. You say, you know, that's so hard to believe. I understand it is, but if we could see the unseen world, when we go out here in the morning, there will be people that brings all kinds of spirits. I'll give you a story of that. I had a Bible study one morning with about 25 women. And I went in there and I sat down, and there was 2 ladies that came in. One I recognized, hadn't seen in a long time, and she was a little different. So as I was sitting there, all of a sudden, bang, it got cold, and something hit my mind. It kind of gave me a paralyzing blow. And then it came back and hit my mind again. And then as it hit my mind, I said, would you begin to pray for me? I said, we have a traveler here that is affecting our Bible study. We prayed, finally that thing. Somebody had brought up a scene they had seen somewhere out that frightened them real bad, and right after that story was told, this took place. Anyway, it left. Later that afternoon, I got a call from a woman. She said, did something hit you this morning? I said, yes, something hit me. And she said, I said, was it the woman you brought with you? And to make a long story short, it was the woman she brought with her. That woman brought it with her. So she said, she wants to see you. Will you go see her? I said, well, if you'll go with me. So we made arrangements to go 10 o'clock the next morning because I want her to pray over it if I'm going to deal with this. So I talked to this woman for about 2 hours, and she was glazed, but I couldn't get through. I thought, hey, I'm here 2 hours. This thing's over. Finally, just as I was about ready to leave, her name was Dina, and it said Donna. I heard that. I heard the difference in the identification of name. So I said, I began to identify it. I said, how long had been afflicting this one? 14 years. I said, you know you have to go? I know I have to go. And so I addressed it by name. Out it went, down she went. But that woman brought it with her. See, when you look at people, you don't know what people bring with you. You don't know what people are involved in, you see. So, because that was the first time I'd ever had an experience quite like that, I went to a pastor friend of mine. I said, I want to tell you this story. He says, tell me the story. I told him the story. I told him what my reaction was to that as it hit me. He says it was a dumb spirit. Jesus dealt with them. And that paralyzing effect, just when it would, describe it the best way I can, when it would hit my mind, it would kind of paralyze my mind. What it was trying to do was trying to gain entrance, you see. So as I asked for this help, ultimately this thing left. But that was happening. That woman brought that with her. You don't know who brings what, you see. Or you don't know, as you sit down here, what that spirit does to steal away your ability to hear. Jesus described 4 types of people. And then he says that the enemy comes back, and when you listen to this, he'll steal it away. So this is a battle against the powers of darkness, and people need deliverance today. This lad, if I tell you, when I'm dealing with something like that, I tell somebody, right, look at it, I say, I want to tell you, you do what I tell you to do according to this book, and God's going to back me up, and you're going to get delivered. Because why? I know every time I've ever done it, I've seen God work. Like praying with somebody. Now, there are other things I don't quite feel that way about. But when God deals with the blood, I tried to talk to this person about the blood of Christ. Blood works every time, but you've got to use it. It's a tool in my toolbox. If I take you to a shrink, instead of using the blood of Christ in 1 John chapter 9, all you're going to do is have the guy give you a potion. Take 2 of these a day for the next 100 years at $25 a piece. Come back 3 weeks and see me. Or you've got another one, take these 2 pills. These will do something for you. And then if we can get you on 25 or 50 of those, what we're going to do is, when we get you there, we got you $100 a day, whatever it is, and it gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. So I'm sorry?
I think she had a question.
Fred, just real quick, where did you say there's 4 types of people?
Those types that hear the word. I think it's in Matthew chapter 12. He says, some of it falls on fallow ground. Some bring forth 30-fold fruit. Some bring forth 100-fold fruit. But the enemy is always at work to pull it out of you. And what we do is we get people prepared to come in here and listen to this. And they don't break up anything. There's nothing to prepare them for this. And then when they walk out, we get them going to the shrink. The shrink, the psychologist, pardon me, is like the witch doctor who gives potions. When he hears what my problem is, he now will prescribe a certain type of pill, Prozac, for example. All that does, it suppresses the object of my mind on what I hear. So what do? Because of my guilt that's being activated by the demonic world, I can live in myself. I had a woman, I saw her husband. She said, I understood you might be able to help me. I said, tell me the story. I looked at him, and she's thinking about divorcing him. Here he comes out. I said, I wonder what's in his behavior. He's going to a psychiatrist, and he's taking these prescriptions. This guy I wrote this story about was taking 25 pills a day. Was inundated with pills, but because he goes to a psychologist who's a doctor with a PhD, and there's nothing wrong with that, it doesn't have the authoritative aspect of if I would just present this, if I could get this person to confess it and get cleansed, the blood always works, restores me, because peace is not psychological. Peace is not psychological, peace is all spiritual. So when I come to Christ, the peace of God keeps my mind. When I violate it, God simply takes his peace away. In comes the railing accusations of the enemy. I hear them. I'm preoccupied with guilt. He comes in and says, call yourself a Christian, don't you? What would people think if they knew what you were doing? I'll tell you what knocks people out who can't be soul winners. This will knock you out of the box every time. Somebody says, I witnessed to that person, and right at the time I could lead them to Christ, you hear this inserts itself, has nothing to do with you, and you never even thought about it. What will he think of you? You ever heard that voice?
Or what if you offend him?
Or the other one is, you don't want to offend him. Mm-hmm. I'm not thinking anything about that at all. That comes like this, right into my mind. But I don't want to offend anybody because he strikes me right in my vanity. Going back to that movie, Vanity, his favorites. Strikes him right in his vanity, knocks me right out of the box because inwardly I agree. Here's what I say inwardly when that thing hits me. No, I don't want to offend him. And I want to be well thought out. That will take 99%. That's when we can't get soul winners. They get knocked out of the box on that. And now the enemy comes back and says, your excuse will be, you don't have the gift. You know what? You don't have the gift for that. That's right, I don't have the gift. Then as a result of that, we have to get them up there to the church. But this process goes on until finally it becomes a stronghold. That stronghold then is now the grid system that I look through the life at, and that affects everything I see. And the enemy keeps pounding on it. This boy down at Caribou, I led he and his girlfriend to Christ. The other day I was there. I mean, I don't know how much I told you the story, but anyway, he goes up to school, and I tell him I'll drive him up. He sits and he's preoccupied. I said, the problem with you is you're experiencing guilt. You're living with a girlfriend. I said, you pray to receive Christ. I said, let's use God's tool to cleanse you, okay? He says, yeah. He says, I know what he's hearing. All these accusations against his mind, who's he going to tell? Can't tell her. She's probably getting the same thing. So we deal with him there, and when he's prayed for cleansing, the blood's done where I said, how you feel? Oh, he says, I feel a lot better. Now I know what he's going to do. I said, I want to tell you something. If you go back and get in that bed with that girl tonight, you have just been cleansed and your temple is garnished and made clean. If you go back into that one that we got rid of this morning is going to come back and he's going to bring 7 more worse than he is. So, because this is a never-ending spiral. Things never get better if I violate what it says after I've been enlightened. Now what I think will happen, he'll go back and do what he did. Then we can pray with him again. As a result of that, he will conclude he doesn't need that anymore. He's getting wise enough to begin to get a fear of God, that if he does that, that's going to be the consequence. I don't want it. I can tell you there are tons of things I might even think of doing. I will never do them, not that I couldn't, because I fear God. The whole thing in a nutshell, I just don't need, it says we had fathers who corrected us. We gave them great respect. They did it for their pleasure, but he for our pleasure. No chastening is pleasant, all is grievous. Whom the Lord loveth, he scourges and chastises every son whom he receives. As a result of that, be a believer, go out there and do something wrong. As sure as that book is written by the Spirit of God, you're going to get it. But you can't, people have to go through and pay big prices to come to those conclusions. So,
And if you wrap that all the way back around to what you were saying about the jail and prison system and the ministry that goes on there, people accept Christ, they'll repent, they'll be washed by the blood, but then they'll go back into the same thing. And you know, if you read 2 Peter, it says, if they have escaped the corruption of the world by knowing our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and are again entangled in it and overcome, they are worse off at the end than they were at the beginning. It would be better for them not to have known the way of righteousness than to have known it and to turn their backs on the sacred command that was passed on to them. And that's what you see, and that's why people get discouraged in ministry like what you're talking about. You know, you see this boy and his girlfriend invite Christ into their lives, but their behavior doesn't change immediately, and then they keep almost getting worse and worse and worse because they're asking for the blood to cleanse them, but then they go back into the sin.
what I'm going to say is we're not going to believe for the most part. Now, the biggest sin that we commit as Christians is our unbelief.
Right.
And my neighbor lives across the hall from me. My Christian neighbor, both of them he and his wife went to CVCA. They both go to the chapel. She runs off with another guy. Now, the guy she runs off with doesn't want to get a divorce, so she's stuck. She's got the truth, but now she doesn't want to be involved with her husband. You see, the minute that that illegal body, that body is touched by somebody illegally, this is the temple of the living God. Even if you touch yourself illegally, God will take away your peace. God knows exactly if you've got an unclean thought, if you're there by yourself. Therefore, because he has divided the soul and the spirit, the joints and the marrow, he watches what you do. God is always at work to make an incision between what? The spirit, the soul, and the spirit. Now, you're not going to get this overnight. That girl has given herself over to that. As a result of that, if that boy prays for her, he can sanctify her. She has still rejected him, no matter how long it takes. As he prays for her, she can be sanctified. However, because she has been now cleansed and garnished, once she's touched that, since they have eyes full of adultery, beguiling unstable souls, what happens is the enemy watches you. The spirit that's watching each one of you knows exactly how to tempt you. If you go to suggestive material, he knows you're a candidate for adultery. The minute he recognizes you as a candidate for adultery, let's say that man is a candidate. Over here, he has a woman that's a candidate. He watches her. She's got hers, he's got his. They get together. What the goal is, let's bring them together. Once we bring them together, there's a little meeting at the water cooler. Nothing wrong with that. They enjoy each other's company. Next thing you know, something doesn't go right at one of their homes that night. Next fun over the weekend, why don't we have a cup of coffee? Now it advances. It takes us another. That's pleasant too. Nothing wrong with that. As we go on, maybe there's something else that comes. Nothing wrong. But now we're on a stage that's going to end up with that word. See, both of these demonic powers are at work influencing you to bring you together at this point. Now it says when you're tempted and you get to a point where your lust will take over, you can't stop it. It gets to the point where you're released. You're going to do that. The minute that happens, there's an unclean spirit involved. This unclean spirit moves in. You know what he's going to do? He's going to create, we call it addictions. He's going to create an appetite. The appetite he's going to, that woman looks at her husband, that man looks at his wife. They can't stand each other anymore. They want to rendezvous out here with this. And now there's what? Spirit of lying comes in. Another spirit makes his presence. They start to become almost professional liars. They're now living in a dark world under the powers of darkness. You see, next thing, because of the guilt, they come home, the husband says something to the wife says something to the now there's a spirit of anger that comes in. You know what we're headed for? We're headed for, we read it all the time, somebody kills their mate. Finally, that enemy starts working on the husband who begins to sense that she says, I want a divorce. He says, I'll kill you. We read it all the time. These things work constantly. See, our problem is trying to get people to see that there's an unseen world. And if I grasp that there's an unseen world, I can look at a guy, and if he's been in something with that dazed look, he's got something in his behavior. This kid I'm telling you about is in behavior. I can tell you of a lot of calls and people that were involved in this type of thing, and you don't get them out unless the blood of Christ cleanses them. This kid here, I said, did they ever teach you about the blood of Christ in seminary? He said, yeah, they taught me. I said, did you ever experience this? He says, no. I said, have you now? He says, absolutely. The other thing he said to me, he says, when I was being ordained, they never asked me what you asked me. I asked him if he did these things. He said, they'd never ask me if I had these type of habits in my life. See, we go to the Catholic Church, go to all of these areas where this type of activity has taken place, and what the enemy has done, he moved right in among the priests, and he seduced them. And they can't, there it is. Be back in a minute. So if I was to be the enemy, I'd move in and seduce all the spiritual leaders. Get an inroad. What's he doing? He's watching a spiritual leader. Where does he get his inroad? Well, he's got a woman who he wants to counsel with him. Where? She wants to counsel with him alone. That's a problem, because that spirit begins to circle the camp and draw these things together. It never ends. You see. Then we see all kinds of people. Now here's the hypocrisy. He called himself a Christian. We don't have the awareness that behind these scenes, all this stuff is working itself out every day. See, uncleanness. And as a result, where do we got it? What's the biggest difficulty? Here's where it hits and where it destroys the people. This houses the imagination and the memory. The Word of God says that their imaginations waxed evil continuously in Genesis chapter 6, and when he said that, here's what he concluded: I've got to destroy them. And then if you read it in Proverbs chapter 6, you read that God hates an evil imagination. Do you get thoughts? Absolutely. Things will come back I did before I was saved and so on. There are the pictures. Got to fight the picture. Not going there. Not going there. The enemy constantly will attempt to bring it back in. See something on television? Here comes a picture. There's that picture that way back. There it comes. I know what I did. God says, hey, got rid of that.
Question. I don't know if you think this is, maybe I'm the one, I'm losing my mind, but I substitute teach. And 20 years ago, I have a question. 20 years ago, it used to be mostly K through 3. So these are little kids. So this is a consensus. 1 or 2 per grade was out there, just not being able to focus on anything. Just you look at them and they just get this completely blank stare. They're looking right at you. They're nodding their head, but they're off into outer space. Now you hear the teachers, and it's 2 to 3 per class that just doesn't get it. They're all over the place. They're kicking desks. They're out of their seats. They're running around. Impossible to teach them. Coincidence?
What? You see, here's an interesting observation. It says they go astray speaking lies as students say be born. So when I look at a kid, I don't know what his eternal future is. It used to be that I thought the accountability was the age of 12. That kid knows what he's doing. I go back, you never have to teach him to do the wrong thing. Always that your instruction as a place of authority is to try to teach him how to do the right thing. Now what has happened is they hear so much of these voices anymore because their minds are totally preoccupied, first of all, with the video games. In the one book that I finished that was read, the writer talks about how these young people at the age of 11 years old are excellent marksmen because they have used these video games to hone in and shoot at critical places, you see. Furthermore, they have been conditioned on blood. The video games and that market simply focuses on one thing, murder, killing. So a kid looks at it, he's popping people off right and left. Every night he's there popping them off. Now he's playing army games, popping more off. They play and play and play. Killing becomes a game. Who's behind it? Satanic powers. Finally, that enemy, how do you know when the cup that the little child is carrying is filled with iniquity? And once he's filled with iniquity, now he's capable of doing anything. Jesus took the cup. Those aren't detached statements. We can drink from the cup of iniquity until we're full of it. Then what? You know what he's talking about? He's talking about in this book 9-year-old children that raped and murdered 6-year-old girls. Where'd they come upon it? It's a game. Enemy says, remember the game? Yeah, it's not. All you have to do is get that with a red mark on it and pop them off.
Well, wouldn't that accountability go to the parents? Wouldn't the evilness go to wouldn't they be a major cause of that?
Well, sure, they permit it.
Because it seems like they just give them the video. Not that all video games are bad, but this seems like in this day and age, the parents just want to get rid of them. Just shut them up. Give them everything they want. There is nothing that they don't have.
Here they come with a Walkman. See, the problem today is the reason, if you talk the bipolar, or what do they call that syndrome where you can't control them? That syndrome is, listen to this, their minds are never theirs. Their minds are watching television, they're listening to, look at a kid walking down the street, he's got these, it's always noise in here. God says, be still, know that I'm God. Very few people, that's one of the reasons I don't have all those things. Because if I have all those things, my mind is totally cluttered with that. There are 2 movies I was thinking about yesterday. I have seen both of them. One is a long time ago. One is not. And what I saw was, what struck me in these movies, they were not just slasher movies, but there was absolutely not the slightest drop of compassion in those people that were the active participants in what they were doing. These people were depicted, if they entered your life, you're dead. It was whoever put that movie together did so under the auspices of demonic power. I had never seen anything as, it wasn't as much the violence as it was the viciousness. So, here's one. This father comes up and says, I did a terrible act. Now he can't get rid of it. What did you do? He decapitated his 9-year-old boy. Now you've got all kinds of people in prison who have done such terrible deeds, they can't live with themselves, again, because of the guilt. See, guilt versus chastisement. I was going to get into this. God never, ever brings judgment on his people. He always brings chastisement on his people. On sinners, he brings judgment. But on Christians, he brings chastisement. So much of what we see is, and all the heartache and the heartbreak is, God chastises people who won't listen to him. He brings judgment on people who are sinners that do and violate certain things. When I go into a prison and speak in a prison, I always say there are 2 types of men. And you're here because your history is a mystery of disobedience. First Adam, you got his nature. Mystery of Christ is a mystery of obedience. Only 2 prototype men on the face of the earth, Christ and Adam. Today you're either in Christ or you're in Adam. What is unfortunate is that the whole arena of hell has been released, and they're brilliant. I'll tell you, every time I heard about flying saucers, several years ago, there was a big, don't laugh, there was a big bunch of sightings up in Stowe, in that area, and a lot of areas. After that, you know what we had? We had the entrance of militant homosexuality. Every time I've ever heard of that stuff that they've observed, there's always been something more aggressive that was evil. My conviction is they're as real as the people that saw them. They're not aliens. You have to realize that when Satan is cast out to earth, all of his montage will be here waiting for him. All the princes and powers of the air will be waiting for their king. And they'll be multiplied in high places in order to invoke what he wants to invoke. When we talk about the last day, we're seeing the arrival of the great kings and princes of mighty power that's in the universe in the satanic world. It's arriving. But we have almighty power. When all of that power is on the earth and they're going to get their king, keep in mind when our king comes, he doesn't visit the earth. He knows who's occupying the earth. You know what he does? He takes all his children out. Follow the process. Prince and power of the air, all of his montage will be on planet, every one of them. And they will be operating in great signs and lying wonders. People will be deceived. They will bring forth their king as a man probably of immaculate character. And he will come, I think he may solve the Arab problem in a masterful way that nobody's ever thought of. And they'll look at him, they'll be over, why didn't we think of that? Make his entrance through this great ability to do this. Who will he have? Have all his emissaries in place. You see. Why? So he can rule the world. We who know Christ, the salt of the earth, we will be gone. Jesus won't do it then. If there's a future war, you know about that. So in the interim, we're involved in this ongoing warfare that we're talking about here. And anyway, you know all that. It's an insidious thing. So anyway, John, why don't you close us?